Trump remains the presumptive GOP nominee, but some would like to draft a third-party nominee to derail him. Can it work? And Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are still neck and neck for the party's nomination. Syndicated columnist and author, former presidential candidate Pat Buchanan joins us to discuss it all. And finally, we'll get story-ented with best-selling children's author N.D. Wilson. He'll reveal the story behind his stories and how to get your kids reading. And I'll talk about my brand new book, The World Over Live, begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Patrick Buchanan, N.D. Wilson are straight ahead. And my big announcement, if you'd like to comment on tonight's show or if you have a question, I'll be live tweeting throughout. Find me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo, or you can email me worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get to it. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. The investigation continues into the EgyptAir Flight 804. The plane crashed into the Mediterranean Sea en route from Paris to Cairo. A cause is not yet known. However, authorities say the plane swerved wildly before disappearing from radar 200 miles off the Isle of Crete. Egypt's civil aviation minister said the possibility is that this is a terrorist attack. It's higher than the probability of having a technical failure. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump believe the crash is the result of a terrorist attack. And the U.S. Supreme Court has handed a victory to religious organizations fighting the Obamacare contraception mandate. But it wasn't a win for religious freedom per se. In a unanimous decision, the 8 justices vacated multiple lower court rulings which held that the Little Sisters of the Poor and similar organizations must comply and cooperate with a federal scheme of providing free contraceptives to their employees, including abortifacients and sterilizations. The court said that there would be no fines for non-compliance, at least for now. However, the court punted on the religious freedom issue. The High Court refused to judge the merits of the case or whether the Little Sisters were substantially burdened. Religious groups and the Obama administration declared the decision a victory for their side. They are compelled by the court to work out a compromise. We'll keep you posted. And the transgender restroom war is again escalating as governors of several states are rejecting President Obama's new directive for public schools. Announced this past week, the federal Departments of Justice and Education are instructing that all public schools must allow students to use the boys' or girls' restrooms or locker rooms, depending on how they self-identify. At least a dozen states have objected, including many more school districts, parents, and the U.S. bishops. The respective chairs of the Bishops' Committee on Education and the Committee on Marriage, Family, and Youth called the Obama directive deeply disturbing. The Catholic bishops say that by affirming a student's gender identity, the government, quote, fails to address a number of important concerns and contradicts a basic understanding of human formation. Quoting Pope Francis's exhortation on the family, they say the young need to be helped in accepting their own body as it was created. Non-compliance with the new transgender directive could expose states to losing billions of education funding, including subsidies for breakfast and lunch programs for needy students. And in a related story, Vatican Cardinal Robert Sarah this week was in the U.S. He implored the faithful of America to resist the removal of God from society, and most notably, what he called a clear and demonic threat to the family: gender ideology. Cardinal Sarah made the comments in a keynote address at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast in Washington on Tuesday.
All manner of immorality is not only accepted and tolerated today in advanced societies, but even promoted as a social good. The death of God results in the burial of good, beauty, love, and truth. Good becomes evil. Beauty is ugly. Love becomes the satisfaction of sexual primal instincts, and truth are all relative.
And in politics, the battle for the Democratic nomination for president continues. After a huge last-minute campaign blitz, Hillary Clinton eked out a much-needed win over Bernie Sanders in Kentucky on Tuesday. But she won by less than 2,000 votes, or half a percentage point. Polling had her up double digits earlier in the month. It was yet another indication of Clinton's struggling campaign. In 2008, she crushed Barack Obama by 35 points in Kentucky. Sanders took Oregon's primary with a comfortable 9-point win. Both states distribute their pledged delegates proportionally. Sanders chipped away at Clinton's delegate lead with a net gain of 12. And the GOP's presumptive nominee, Donald Trump, has grown his lead over Hillary Clinton in the latest national poll. According to Rasmussen, Trump leads Clinton 42 to 37% among likely voters. Earlier in May, the two were in a statistical dead heat, just 2 points apart. And Trump's approval rating among rank-and-file Republicans also appears to be growing. According to a recent NBC poll, nearly 60% of Republican voters say they trust Trump to lead the party. That's some 20 points higher than Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. When asked about the numbers, Speaker Ryan appeared okay with it all.
I hope it's Donald Trump. He's getting the nomination. I mean, he should. He's wrapping up the nomination. Good Lord, I hope it is, because the person who's getting the nomination of our party is the person to lead our party.
More on the Democrats, Trump, and the Republicans with Pat Buchanan next. And in Nigeria, a glimmer of good news this week at last. One of the Chibok schoolgirls kidnapped by Boko Haram terrorists over 2 years ago is home. 19-year-old Amina Ali Neki was found with her newborn baby in the forest, wandering and traumatized, according to reports. She is the first of the Chibok girls to be freed since the mass abduction. The schoolgirl was reunited with her mother on Tuesday. Sadly, her father died while she was held in captivity. Boko Haram militants stormed and firebombed the government girls' secondary school at Chibok in April of 2014. They seized 276 girls at the time. 219 remain missing. And in Europe, with a referendum vote a little more than a month away, British Prime Minister David Cameron continued his campaign against Brexit, Britain leaving the EU. On Tuesday, Cameron focused on the British economy and the key advantages of remaining a member of the EU.
An argument says this single market is growing, it's expanding, it's going to cover energy, it's going to cover services, it's going to cover digital, and it is a key advantage to our economy, to growth and to jobs and investment to stay in.
And while the Catholic Church in the UK remains officially neutral on the issue, the Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster, Vincent Nichols, and his predecessor, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, have both personally endorsed the vote to remain in the European Union. The latest polls show those determined to remain in the EU with a double-digit lead over those in favor of a Brexit. The referendum will be held on June 23rd. And the ongoing talks between the Traditional Society of St. Pius X continue to show progress. In an interview with the National Catholic Register's Edward Penton, Bishop Bernard Fallet, the Society's leader, says he remains optimistic that an accord between the Society and the Vatican can be reached, and the breakaway group brought into full communion with Rome. Fallet spoke of a new attitude within the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith in Rome in dealing with the group.
On the side of the Congregation of the Faith, there is a new perspective on us, which claims that thanks to these discussions, once again, it appears that the Society is not schismatic. That means that the point...
Fallet went on to say that Rome may be placing less weight on the Society's attitude toward Vatican II reforms and more emphasis on saving souls and finding ways to do it, something the Holy Father favors, particularly during the Year of Mercy. In a recent interview, the Pope told a French daily that the society was, quote, considering themselves Catholic. They love the Church. I think that they are Catholics on the path to full communion, end quote. We will continue to follow this story. And Pope Francis had some harsh words this week for those who exploit workers for cheap labor. In his homily at Mass on Thursday, he called human traffickers and unjust business owners true leeches that live off the bloodletting of people whom they have made to work as slaves. The Pope used the example of a businessman who pays his workers little without vacation time or health insurance while becoming rich himself. He called such exploitation a mortal sin that, quote, takes much patience, much restitution to overcome. And finally, I am so excited, I'm proud to announce the publication this week of the capstone of my Mother Angelica collection, the sequel to her biography and the last word on her incredible life. Mother Angelica, Her Grand Silence, The Last Years and Living Legacy is available everywhere at bookstores. This new book contains never-before-revealed details of Mother's final mission, illuminating unpublished interviews printed here for the first time, and a tribute to a woman who was a spiritual mother to so many of us and a dear friend to me. In Mother Angelica, Her Grand Silence, you will learn about Mother's secret trip to the Far East after her stroke, the dramatic supernatural attacks she endured in her cell, and encounter the testimonies of some of the millions of lives she touched during her 15 years out of the public eye. For the first time, I also write about our personal relationship and the event that nearly ended our friendship before it began. A piece of my heart is on these pages. What I love about this book, and some of the early readers have confirmed this, for anyone suffering, for anyone accompanying a loved one to the end of their journey, the end of this life, Mother Angelica, Her Grand Silence will give you hope, because her story demonstrates the meaning and the power to be found with faith on the far side of suffering. She was so wise, and in her final years, she didn't just teach lessons about the redemptive power of pain, she lived them. Find out how her story truly ended and why it goes on. Mother Angelica, Her Grand Silence, The Last Years and Living Legacy is available now at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, wherever books are sold. Go to RaymondArroyo.com for more information. And thank you for supporting this important work. A portion of the proceeds benefit the Sisters of Our Lady of the Angels Monastery. When we return, we'll look at the 2016 presidential race, including Donald Trump's choices for the Supreme Court and Hillary versus Bernie. Is an upset in the offing. Columnist and former presidential candidate Pat Buchanan is here. The World Over continues in a moment. Stay right there.
When we came up here to New Hampshire and you and I stood together to say to the national establishment of both parties, turn around, you're going the wrong way. We may have lost that nomination, my friends, but you and I have won the battle for the heart and soul of the Republican Party.
That was Pat Buchanan from 1995 in New Hampshire. And in many ways, he did claim the heart and soul of the Republican Party and pave the way for Donald Trump. Welcome back to The World Over Live. Trump is the GOP presumptive nominee. But could a third-party challenge be on the horizon? And how will the Democrats deal with their ongoing primary fight? Few are more qualified to analyze all of this than my guest tonight. He's a syndicated columnist, former advisor to 3 U.S. presidents, a 2-time presidential candidate, and author of The Great Comeback. Please welcome back to the program, Pat Buchanan.
Good to see you.
Great to see you, Pat. Now, you heard that clip.
Right.
You must be smiling a little bit today. Do you think you are the John the Baptist of Donald Trump?
Who would that make Donald Trump?
I'm not getting into that one. I'm just using an analogy.
No, I do
the voice crying in the wilderness is what I was after.
I do think that Donald Trump, I think he's come independently on his own to the issues of securing the border, stop the mass immigration into the country, no more of these trade deals that are deindustrializing America. and for heaven's sake, stay out of these wars where no vital interests are engaged that cost us so much in blood and treasure. And these were the issues Buchanan ran on. And I think what Trump has succeeded so well is what we predicted and what we said was going to happen has come to pass. There are now 12 million illegals in the country, not 3 or 4. All over the country, you got towns and cities that have experienced deindustrialization, loss of factories and jobs. And so when he says these trade deals were worthless, he's got something to point to prove. He's got the proof of it. We predicted it was going to happen, and it came to pass. And Donald Trump is getting the benefit of it because he went out and said these things.
Where the right went wrong, Pat. How long ago did you write that book?
I wrote that in 2004, I believe. Yeah.
And you think he's reaping the benefits of
What he's doing,
that
he's hitting the populist nationalist issues that differentiated Buchanan conservatism from, if you will, neoconservatism or the traditional conservatism. That's right, and those are the issues he's ridden. But his crowds are enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about the tens of thousands and even the scores of thousands.
But has he won the heart and soul of the party? You mentioned earlier that at that time you said, we've won the heart and soul of the party. Has Donald Trump done that?
I don't think he has yet. But I do think he's got a vast majority of the party is reconciled to his nomination now, and it's going to work for him. I think something like 75% now is reconciled, and he's brought an enormous number into the party, or into the primaries. You've had the largest turnouts in the history of primaries, and he's won them going away. There's a real potential if they can pull the traditional Republican conservatives and even the establishment, drag them kicking and screaming, put them together with these populists and nationalists. Quite frankly, that's the making of a new majority like we created with Richard Nixon in 1972.
Oh, and you've been writing about in recent days. I want to play something for you and for the audience. Talking about influence, listen to this.
We are losing industries like autos and steel. We have lost TVs, VCRs, radio. The Japanese are putting under assault supercomputers, flat panel technology. They are challenging our aircraft industry. Where is the administration plan to make America first again in manufacturing by the year 2000?
My foreign policy will always put the interests of the American people and American security above all else. Has to be first. Has to be. That will be the foundation of every single decision that I will make. America first will be the major and overriding theme of my administration.
Why is he embracing the Buchanan doctrine, and why is it playing better than it played in 92 or 96 or 2000, Pat? What's the difference?
There's a number of differences. One is we've been deindustrialized. In the first decade of this century, we lost 6 million manufacturing jobs, 55,000 factories. Every state, every county almost has seen a company been destroyed by massive imports. Secondly, Donald Trump, frankly, is an enormously large figure, and he has hit this issue at exactly the right time. Everybody's ignored it. The whole Beltway completely did not understand the power of the issue. It's economic patriotism, as Russell Kirk told me to use, instead of economic nationalism. And that is the issue that he's tapped into. And quite frankly, this is the one he is really riding, that and border security, America first. When that phrase came over the TV, members of my immediate family were texting each other and emailing each other, Pat must be in pig heaven.
Well, I was emailing you saying, when do the royalty checks from the Trump organization arrive at the Buchanan house? Any day now, I hope.
Anyway, I was delighted, really delighted to hear it and see it and see him stand up for it and not be cowed and bullied. This is one thing he's got going for him, too. He defies political correctness, sometimes maybe going too far, and then he refuses to apologize. And the whole country wants this establishment, this city, slapped down. And he's doing it.
It comes at the right time. Yeah, the pain has increased a lot more than when you were.
Oh, far more. See, that's there. Also, the returns are in from these wars.
Yeah.
And they're terrible.
Terrible. He met with your old pal, Henry Kissinger, another member of the Nixon cabinet.
Mr. Dayton himself.
That's right. right. What do you make of that? Is that a wise decision? Is that Trump trying to bring in the establishment in the Republican Party?
I think he did the right thing. It shows a courtesy. You go visit the people from the past, and it shows a willingness to come together, and you even ought to come together with the establishment. And I don't believe Henry, who's well into his, or is into his 90s now, is going to influence Donald Trump, but he will try really to get him off these themes that we've got to get NATO countries to start paying their own way. These allies have to do more to defend themselves. That economic and that foreign policy nationalism, Henry will warn him about that. That's the differences Henry and I had. Matter of fact, I'm writing about it in my present book.
Your new book.
On the Nixon days, yeah.
Has Trump reached out to you? Have you met with him?
I have not met with him, but I've talked to him once or twice. He has phoned and been very gracious about various things I've written, and some things he's seen me on TV. And he once saw me, I think, on CNN. He was tweeting, "Buchanan's great," or something. On TV, the host went on TV. Well, we seem to have gotten Trump's attention.
In real time, because they're watching the Twitter feed. Well,
yeah.
He's an instant audience. Now, at the same time, you're talking about Trump resonating with this audience in the particular place they are. There is still a sizable chunk of the Republican establishment in this town, Bill Kristol, Mitt Romney, Senator Ben Sasse, who are holdouts, and they're still saying, Eric Erickson, never Trump, never Trump.
Well, look,
and they're threatening a third party. You've run as a third party candidate. Will it work? What should they be doing at this point?
No, it won't work. Look, President Bush, father and son, both are not endorsing Trump, and neither is Jeb Bush,
right,
despite his pledge. And Romney, I understand that if they say we just can't endorse, and I've got such disagreements. But the idea of putting out a third-party ticket, the only effect of that, the only result of that will be to sink Trump and elect Hillary Rodham Clinton and have her replacing Justice Scalia and maybe 2 or 3 more justices. That is the end of any effort to overturn Roe v. Wade. That is the end of any effort to end affirmative action. Obamacare will be forever. I can't understand. I can understand how people may say, I can't stand Trump, et cetera. But I don't understand how you can try to create a situation which will bring him down and automatically elect Hillary Clinton. And this is what they're doing. And I think Romney's making a terrible mistake in doing this. And frankly, there's no way a third-party candidate who is a Republican or a conservative can get anything other than Republican and conservative votes. And splitting the Republican-conservative vote, who automatically benefits from that?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I want to show you this and share this with the audience. This is the latest Fox News poll. It has Trump leading Clinton 45 to 42%. Now, Pat, these polls fluctuate. This is like weekly polls. Who knows?
I saw one today that had him ahead by 5.
Okay, and what do you think of this?
I think that Hillary Clinton is in deep, deep trouble. I am surprised, very surprised. I thought Trump could close the gap, but that he appears to have closed it in May is astonishing.
But wait a minute, but Pat, he has basically cinched the nomination. There's no other. Ted Cruz and Kasich are gone. She's still battling. No, but she's still battling it out with Bernie, and his supporters are still sticking by him. So once she gets the nomination formally, might those numbers tighten up, or could she surpass Trump?
No, I agree with you. I think they will tighten. I'm just surprised to see Trump ahead right now.
Pulling ahead, yeah.
Pulling ahead right now. I do think she will do better, but I think Bernie is going all the way to that convention. He says he's going to fight it to the last delegate, and he is damaging her. And frankly, I thought she was, incidentally, was an outstanding candidate after she lost 12 primaries and came back, won Pennsylvania and Ohio. And I said, you know, whether you like her or not, you got to admire this She's not as good a candidate anymore. She's, excuse me, she's extremely shrill at times. Maybe it's because they picked the tapes and put them on the air, but you know, you're in the other. What? I thought my cat had come back to life.
Oh, no.
No, it's really, it's very loud and shrill, and it does not come off well.
Yeah, she's been shouting a lot.
And Bill's not looking good. He's not in the peak of health either.
Well, and Trump invoking all of Bill's indiscretions and, you know, over the last 20 years, that
when we were kids,
put him away, right?
Kids on Thanksgiving Day, if it was raining real badly, we all went up to Chevy Chase Pleasant. playground and got into a mud bowl. It was called, so you wouldn't hurt yourself, but everyone's in the mud playing tackle football. That is what this campaign is going to be about. It is going to be the greatest mud bowl in American history.
Who do you think wins in the end?
I think Trump can win. See, I don't think, I agree with you on Hillary.
Yeah.
If the Democratic Party is, again, a larger party than ours, but I do think Trump has the potential to reach folks in places like Pennsylvania, in places like Michigan, in states Republicans haven't gotten in 6 elections.
Because of the appeal to the workers and
the appeal to the blue-collar folks, and he
Mm-hmm.
also, I mean, Bernie is getting these folks who are
Right.
deeply dissatisfied with the Democratic Party, that abandoned them and is elitist and, you know, over-intellectualized. And
Yet here's what Hillary Clinton said earlier today. She's
Right.
presuming she's got this thing tied up.
Right.
Roll that.
I will be the nominee for my party, Chris. That is already done, in effect. There is no way that I won't be. I went all the way to the end against Senator Obama. I won 9 out of the last 12 contests. Back in 2008, I won. But we both were following the same rules, just as both Senator Sanders and I are following the same rules. And I'm 3 million votes ahead of him, and I have an insurmountable lead in pledged delegates.
She said she has an insurmountable lead. It's done.
I think she's going to win it. I think it is done. Absent celestial intervention, I think she's got the nomination. But I think Bernie's going to be heard from between now and then. I think there's a possibility Bernie could win California, which would be an immense blow to her.
Right.
One of her real problems is the millennial generation, the young people, she's doing horribly. I mean, young people all feel the burn and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And so, there's a possibility, I think, that the mainly white working class folks in all those old industrial states who have been abandoned, they've gone with Bernie against Hillary. They're potential Trump voters, I believe.
Yeah. But look in the matchup. Here's the Fox News poll. Bernie Sanders continues to beat Trump, 46% to 42%. And Bernie Sanders, rather, claims he's not going anywhere. He's continuing to hammer Hillary Clinton. What effect does this have? This is him yesterday at a rally in California. Watch this.
Secretary Clinton has a number of super PACs, and in the last filing period, reported receiving $15 million from Wall Street. Our job is to take on Wall Street, not to take their money.
Does that hurt Hillary Clinton?
Oh, it sure does. I feel the burn listening to that.
You're getting a little burn.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Sure.
Back in 1993, when I was fighting against NAFTA, I was on a radio station 3 hours a day.
Yep.
And we were battling NAFTA, and when I couldn't get some major guest in, I'd tell him, call up Bernie Sanders. And he would come on the air and he'd do a great job. He was battling NAFTA with Ralph Nader, Pat Buchanan, Ross Perot, and the head of the AFL-CIO.
Well, I've always said Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders in some ways are appealing to the same crowd, same audience.
That is, see, if Trump can bring that section that Bernie brought in, he's going to have a tough time with the millennials. They may stay home. But if he brings in those working class folks again, you're talking Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, states we haven't carried in 6 or 7 elections. If you bring those, he's home.
Still, there's some unease out there, Pat, particularly among social conservatives.
Right.
There's unease about embracing Donald Trump. So he came out with a list of judicial picks the other day. He discussed it with Sean Hannity. Here's what he had to say.
As I said, Scalia and Thomas, they are what we call originalists, constitutionalists.
Correct.
You are a constitutionalist.
Correct. And I want high intellect. I want great intellect. These people are all of very high intellect. They're pro-life. Perhaps outside of the defense of our country, perhaps the single most important thing the next president is going to have to do is pick Supreme Court justices.
Do you trust him? And there are a lot of pro-life Catholics who are uneasy. They feel this is just another sales job. Is it?
No, I trust him for this reason. He knows where the Republican Party's heart is. He doesn't have any disagreement with people like Scalia. He knows how deeply we've admired him. And I think it's in his interest, in his political interest and his interest if he were president, to appoint people and do paddle for people like Scalia, Thomas, Alito and battle for those folks. And he knows that. Well, there's nothing in it for him moving left, appointing a Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So, you know, as for and so he offered those 10 judges out there. Many of them were state Supreme Court judges. I don't believe I knew deeply about any of them. But it's a clear signal that, look, you are in it with us. You know, I'm coming with you on this, entirely on the Supreme Court issue, which social conservatives care about deeply.
Yeah.
Now, do I think deep inside him he's been a lifelong social conservative?
Yeah.
It does not appear so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ronald Reagan, let's be fair. Ronald Reagan, whom you worked for, wrote speeches for, this is the man who signed the most pro-abortion bill in any state, the first one in the United States. I mean, if there was anybody who was unreliable, at least when he first ran
he was also
on
the
paper.
First divorced man, I think, elected president of the United States. But, you know, of course, I do believe Reagan was deeply converted. I used to sit at lunches with him. He'd come in, we'd have a senior staff lunch. He would say, let me read this. Ann Higgins had sent him a letter up, and it was some woman. She said, you know, I had 3 children. My husband left me, and I was pregnant with my 4th. I was going to have an abortion. And now I'm in my 80s, and that 4th son is the one taking care of me. It was tremendously moving, but here's Reagan. All you staff fellows, sit down.
Yeah, listen up.
Listen up.
Wow.
It was a very moving thing. So I think Reagan was a conservative of the heart, and I think he was deeply converted, and partly by the assassination thing. Again, I was sitting in some of those meetings. He said, now, you know, the rest of my time, it belongs to him. And he would point at the...
point at the big guy.
Yeah.
Do you think Donald Trump is a conservative of the heart?
I think... No, I would not say he's not a... I mean, I do think he understands these issues, and I do think he feels them. Well, let me say this in his defense. I do think he sees what's happening. He hears the audiences out there. These people are hurting. Nobody's representing. I'm going to represent them and really, really going to kick some folks around that come after you now. I think so in a way, he's a populist and a nationalist of the heart.
Yeah, no, and look, he's, whether people like him or hate him, he has done something historically that no one else has been able to achieve for basically at bargain basement prices. Let's admit it. I mean, he hasn't spent anything near what his competitors did on this race.
It's been amazing, as 17 Republicans can tell you.
Pat Buchanan, I want to have you back soon. I hope you'll come back, and you can't wait to read the new memoir. Pat's latest, The Greatest Comeback, How Richard Nixon Rose from Defeat to Create a New Majority, is still in bookstores everywhere, and his latest about Nixon is coming up. That's going to be a barn burner. Up next, best-selling kids author N.D. Wilson is here. He's taken children through 100 cupboards and on adventures with an ancient society of explorers. Now he's time-hopping through the Southwest. We'll talk about his inspirations and how to get your kids hooked on reading. Our story-ended segment on the world over is next. Stay right there. What a...
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over and our story-ended segment, where we talk to some of the best authors writing for kids and kids at heart. He's the best-selling author of 9 novels for children, including the 100 Cupboards Trilogy and the Ashtown Burial series. He also joins us tonight to talk about the craft of story writing, literacy, and his latest book, the first in a brand new series, Outlaws of Time, The Legend of Sam Miracle. Please welcome best-selling author N.D. Wilson. Nate, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to see you. What great work. I want to talk for a moment about your background. Your father, who was a pastor, used to read at the dinner table to you all, to you and your 2 sisters. How did that begin to shape you and form you as a writer, as a person?
You know, it's really difficult for me to even try to answer because I don't know what it was like to not have that. So now that I have my own children and I tell them stories and we read together, I can kind of get a better sense of what my father really did and the impact that it had on me. So it wasn't just my father, my mom telling me stories at bedtime, making stories up. Ours was a family of storytelling.
They're both writers. These are both writers.
My mom's an English teacher, so her writing is practical instruction, and she even has a little English, textbook that she's done. My dad is a pastor, so a lot of theology, philosophy, that kind of thing. But at home, it was C.S. Lewis and Tolkien.
Those were your 2
growing
stars.
up. Yeah, those were the early catechisms of my youth. and what is nobility, what is sacrifice, what is courage, what is love actually, what is honor. And all that's from Lewis and Tolkien. And then later on, when there's actually more just practical instruction on the nature of the world, it all fit in the grain of those stories that I've been told.
No, it's almost like composting. All that stuff settles down and turns into something rich. Or, in my vernacular, being a New Orleanian, it's gumbo. You throw everything in, it cooks down. I love the idea, and I read it somewhere, where you just mentioned Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, of course, the great British giants of this literature, fantasy literature, literature for children and adults, I think. But you felt that Americans needed a shot at magic and mythology and a sense of wonder. Tell me about how that informed your work and what you're doing now.
Well, it started for me because I had a fantastic rural childhood in Idaho. In the wheat fields of Idaho, crop dusters floating down streams.
Wow.
You know, climbing around in big red barns.
All the big adventures kids
baseball,
crave.
barbecue, and then everything wonderful that happens in the great outdoors. But I felt like I did not have a magical childhood. I did not live in a magical place because the stories I read were British.
Far away.
They were English writers for English children. And so I could have a fantastic day in the wheat field with my Red Ryder BB gun and go home and sort of sigh and say, like, oh, I wish I lived somewhere amazing like Narnia. And so later, when I started actually writing stories, I really wanted to write stories for Western kids with an American mythology that would make them excited to run out their back door. I didn't want any kids to read my books and then sit there sad about their own lives or go play games with dice in the basement. I wanted kids to read my books and then run outside and look at the dandelions and the stars.
Experience creation in a new way.
The wind. I mean, we live in such a magical place. You know, I tell kids in every school visit, they live on a ball of lava going around a star at Mach 86, and that star is so powerful that the starlight makes forests and grass and fruit. And that's where we live. That's the world in which we live. So I tell them if they took Frodo Baggins home for an afternoon, he would tell them at the end of that afternoon, I wish I lived in a magical world like you. So I want to wake readers up to this place, to the struggles of their time, of their stories, and have them be really fed and strengthened as characters in their own.
What's that great Chesterton line? The world is filled with wonders, but starved for wonder.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you really do rekindle that in your work. And it being set in America means something. With apologies to our UK and Irish viewers, and I love you all. And Nate does too.
I mean, the Brits, I have nothing against the Brits at all, of course. The only thing is, they have plenty of fantastic fiction already.
That's right.
It's not that I want to starve them.
They've had their fill.
It's not that I want to starve them. It's that they are well fed.
Look, even Ms. Rowling is following your lead because she's coming to the new world now. So there. Let's talk for a minute about this new book, Outlaws in Time. Where did this come from? It was born of a nightmare.
It was, actually, and I was trying to come up with a superhero story, a true, not a story with tights. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for the authentic Old Testament Samson, old superhero story.
Classic superhero.
A classic superhero story that also gave us the type of the lone law dog in the Old West. So the Old Western stories with that one outsider who comes in and takes on the troubles of others that aren't really his, they're not really his problems. That is the same classic superhero template. I wanted that, and I could not come up with a character until, luckily, my temperature went up high enough one night. I crested 104, 105.
All right.
Fell asleep and dreamt that I had my arms destroyed, was dragged into a cave in the Arizona desert, and had my arms saved by an old man who grafted live rattlesnakes into my arms.
Into your arms, which is what happens to Sam in the book.
So I woke up thinking I had rattlesnakes in my hands.
Oh my God.
And then as soon as I realized I didn't, I realized I had it. It'd been about 2 years coming, looking for the story. I gathered up my 5 children, did a little focus group.
Yeah. Oh, this is what I do. Focus groups are the best.
Told them a story around the dinner table. I was like, I got a story about this boy named Sam Miracle, and his left hand, Cindy the rattlesnake, is evil and wants to kill him, and he has to learn to control her, sitting on her. Like she's evil, and his right hand Speck is always distracted, ADD, wandering off, and so and won't hurt anyone. So Speck won't hurt anybody. Cindy wants to kill everything.
Wow.
On his right and his left, and watching him grow into mastery of his own desires, really. There's a lot going on under the surface of that.
Well, yeah,
but it's just it is an old Western time-hopping
where did the
superhero
time
story.
travel come from? Okay, because this time travel is very difficult. Now, you pull it off beautifully, but I'm thinking, I look at this as a writer and I go, this is a nightmare of construction, because you've got this Navajo priest, time walker, and he is trying to presage where the bad time walker is. There's a guy trying to kill Sam. I'll just ruin a little bit of it for people. I won't spoil it all. And he is trying to time hop with these kids to protect them, trying to presage and get ahead of the horrible things that are about to befall them. Where did the time travel thing come from? And why make that kind of obstacle for yourself as a writer?
Well, I've done this for a little while. And the attraction of this story to me was very especially the difficulty. So I've done stories about little magic doors in the wall. I've done the Order of Explorers. I've done things like that. And there are two major attractions where trying to write a character who has separate consciousnesses in each hand.
Pulling him apart.
So in one scene, he's there, but his one hand is trying to impose one will and the other another. And working to try to navigate that as a writer was very difficult and very fun. The time travel piece was, I really didn't want to pocket this into one period.
Genre or...
I didn't want this to be a Western, and I didn't want this to be a modern superhero story. I wanted this story to be timeless. And as I was trying to tap into the timelessness of this particular struggle between good and evil, who rules the image of God, who rules the future, who rules the destiny of man, that struggle is so much bigger than a moment. And as I tried to capture that, that timelessness, is like, well, time fell off. That's how it became a time travel story.
I see.
They move through periods of time. Also, the nature of sacrifice and death and living well. That theme in particular, what it means to lay down your life, that the time travel offered a fantastic opportunity to explore that.
There is a through line here between the Ashtown Burial series. You have there an Irish monk with a mohawk who helps the kids in that
Brother
particular
Niffy.
story. Brother Niffy. Here you have Father Tiempo, who is a time-traveling Navajo priest. What is the through line here with these religious figures? What is their importance that runs through these works?
If I'm just going to roll my cards, just dump them on the table and give people a glimpse into the sausage being made, I really enjoy the complexity of the good guys. When you are playing for the villains, your job is very simple.
Yeah, it really is.
You decide that you are well-intentioned, what you're doing is best for everybody else, and you begin to try to impose that forcibly. But on the side of the good, there's always a level of freedom. And that freedom brings the freedom to rot, to decay, to take things for granted, to not do what you should do. And so the good guys are always fairly disorganized and not nearly as on one page.
Methodical as the
so
villains.
I wanted to write stories about good institutions that had grown moss and were falling apart. The Order of Brendan and Ashtown Burials. You have Father Tiempo, who's really trying to serve something ancient, and yet he feels so very, very alone. But I wanted to make him a priest so that I'm revealing he's part of something much bigger. He's not just a lone guy in the desert. And that's why he's Father Tiempo. I also just wanted him to be Father Time.
Yeah, the man alone who's Father Time. You wrote a piece recently about why scary stories are important for kids, because there are some frights in this book. And let's admit it, having talked to probably tens of thousands of kids between us, kids love to be frightened a little bit. They like the scare. Why is it important? Some people go, oh, we don't need any frights. We don't need to see the darkness. We don't need to see the demons. We don't want to see that. You would say what?
Two major things. One is just practical. Do you want healthy children or not? You know, if you bubble your child and keep them from anything frightening, into what world do you think you are raising them?
Well, where are they going to go someday?
They're going to be released into this world, and this world is full of terrors and horrors, a variety of darkness. So if you want to prepare them, catechize them. If you want to prepare them, feed them for the journey, feed them for what they're going to be undertaking. And giving them an opportunity to vicariously experience fear and vicariously experience courage is a fantastically healthy thing. I've used it very, very particularly. I mentioned it in the article for the Atlantic Monthly with my own children when they struggled with nightmares. I would find out what the villain was. I would really try to figure out where the fear was, and I would tell them a scary story. But it'd be a scary story, not a horror story, but a scary story in which good triumphed, in which they were empowered and enabled to address it. That's part one. Part two is, I think if you don't cast the darkness in your stories in a realistic ratio to the light, then you are lying about the light.
To the kids, yeah.
So if you don't have fear, if you don't have evil, you are also lying about sacrifice and love and courage. If you make the villain some, Papa Smurf with horns, as horrifying as that is.
Yeah, that's pretty scary already.
So if the villain is Papa Smurf with horns, then the kind of courage required to face that villain is nothing much.
Right.
When you have true darkness, when you have true fear, you can also show true sacrifice, the passion. You can show the willingness to lay down a life, the willingness to go into the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil. That's the whole point. In order to fear no evil, if you mitigate the evil, there's nothing much to that, right?
No, I agree.
That's why. So to really communicate the depth of and the power of the light, but also to pragmatically equip kids to be fantastic characters in their own stories.
I agree. There are some questions I ask every author who sits here for a story-oriented segment. These are rapid fire, but take as long as you like.
Okay.
Your favorite children's book and why?
The Two Towers.
Oh.
And I would say it's a children's book because he wrote those stories for his children.
Yeah.
And I love The Two Towers because it captures those truly bittersweet moments of victory through sacrifice.
Tell me your least favorite book.
Oh, man.
Not a trick question.
There was a book, the first time I ever stayed up all night reading a book, it was a horrible little Crusader historical fiction novel. I don't remember if it was called The Black Rose, but I think it might have been. And I had not yet learned the ability to stop reading a book.
Oh, so you had to finish it.
And I started it and I hated it. And I was like, I can't pull out. I have to exit out.
I have to finish this.
Exit out the rear. And so I stayed up all night. I read it that night. I got through it and I was like, oh, I hated that. And my dad opened my door. It was time to go to school. He opened the door and looked in and the lights were on. And he looked at me and said, did you stay up all night? I said, yes. He's like, what were you doing? I was like, reading this horrible
monstrosity in the corner there.
And he just told me, like, don't do that again. It was like it was a school night. They never thought they had to tell me not to stay up all night reading.
Okay.
So yeah, that one.
We have a tagline for the story-oriented site, which is my literacy initiative, and it is find your story, find your way. What was the story that furnished you with the greatest lesson that you take even into life today? And what was the lesson? Okay,
there's so many, and all of them have to do with my parents, probably. But once my dad bought some land, this is the way my father.
Oh, so it's a real story. It's not even a fictional book.
This is the real one that continues to shape me. If I said fictional, it'd probably be bedtime stories from my mom, Lewis Tolkien. My dad wrote me a little book called Undertown. There's one copy of it. He wrote it, gave it to me. That's it. That one. So there's a lot.
Yeah.
But my dad bought some land. He wanted to build a house. The kind of guy he is he never fears small beginnings. He just gets started. And so he bought a book called How to Build a House. Like it was, here we go. So in junior high, I spent a lot of time out on that land with him. And
building a house.
Yeah, but when we didn't have the money to do it, because he was a pastor, we would still go out there and work on the land. And we would just be working. And I remember maybe on the 4th consecutive day, it might have been more than that, in which I was raking gravel. And we had a gravel pad inside our foundation. We had the concrete walls. We were just raking the gravel and packing it down, and raking the gravel and packing it down. And I asked him, like, why am I doing this? Like, why? It's like the gravel, it's raked. Like, it has been raked. He told me, he's like, well, because I have gravel and I have a rake. And say, if that's what I have in front of me,
that's what I'm going to use.
I will be faithful with that. And I will be sitting here raking gravel, saying to God,
What's next?
Look at what I'm doing with this rake. You gave me a rake, you gave me rocks. So I'm raking the rocks. If you give me something else,
I'm waiting for the next
I'm ready.
moment.
And that struck me. I was probably in 8th grade, and that has struck me throughout my career over and over and over again when I'm thinking, what am I supposed to be doing? What's my call in this moment, this month, this summer? And I have spent a lot of time raking rocks.
Living in the present moment.
Yeah, just like what do I have? I've got a rake, and he's given me rocks, so that's what I'm going to do.
Where do you write and why?
I write in a loft in my house above an outdoor porch kind of sticks out. I write there because I built it for that purpose. There's a little spiral staircase that goes up from my bedroom to this writer's loft, and many good things have happened there.
A roost,
Yep.
a little roost.
A writer's roost.
Where do your best ideas come from?
From compost. I mean, from the compost of scripture, from the compost of history, mythologies, ancient literature.
It all starts to weave together.
It all starts there. I say compost a whole bunch of great books, classics, Old Testament stories, pagan mythologies, all sorts of things. Just compost it all together. I then sit in a really hot shower in the dark, and voila, you're going to have something.
Let it ferment. Check in with me 6 months from now.
There's going to be something.
Tell me, if you could pick a writing mentor, dead or alive, it would be whom?
That's tough. That's really tough, because I would immediately drift. I'd want to drift to, the Oxford boys.
Yeah.
But I think I'd be far. If I could make them answer any question, probably Mark Twain.
Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Of course, you'd go with the American.
If I could force him to answer any question, if I knew that he was going to be himself and not answer my questions,
You wouldn't answer any of your questions.
I would go somewhere else.
Back to the pub with Lewis and
because he would actually
Tolkien.
try to help me.
Well, they tried to help each other.
Exactly.
They had some titanic battles, though, in that room.
Yes, they did.
Between them. Advice to parents trying to get their kids to read. What do you suggest? What do you do with your own children?
If you're struggling to get a kid to read aloud. And I have another personal story here where I became a very picky reader.
Yep.
And it was just Lewis Tolkien.
You were reading the same
stuff. It was
stuff
like to
over
a
and over
fault
again.
now. Like I wouldn't read other things. I would just read the books I knew I already loved. I didn't want to risk not liking something, waste that time. I'd even just go read the same chapters over and over.
My gosh.
And finally my mom sat me down on the couch and she picked up a book called King Solomon's Mines.
Oh.
She flipped to the center of it to this particularly brutal, violent chapter called The Witch Hunt. Drums beating, witch dancing, Zulu warriors lined up, waiting to see which of them will be executed.
Yeah.
And she's reading this to me. I was 12. My mother's reading this to me out loud. And then she stops right in the middle, and she just puts the book down. Says, you don't like to read anyway. She walks off. Well, I mean, you know what happened. There goes the book. If you have a kid struggling to read, don't try to read them something important. Don't try to read them something serious. Read them something that will grab them
by the throat
in a true story grip, intense way. Read them something action-packed and scary, and stop, and then hand them the book.
Final question quickly. Are you a gardener or an architect, as Mr. Martin says, George Martin says, writers are either gardeners or architects. You are which?
I think I'm an architect that fills everything with dirt.
You outline everything before you start?
I do it on a napkin.
So you don't do a full, it's kind of a floating outline.
I do an outline. I plan a road trip from Seattle to Miami, and I'll say, I'm going to do this in 3 days or 4 days. I will do an outline for my book that is 5 beats total. I know what the beginning is, I know what the middle is, I know what the end is. I know the middle of the beginning, I know the middle of the end.
That's it.
And then before each chapter, I'll do the same thing for each chapter. And so I fill it in brick by brick, and by the end, I'll have a ton of outlines. But I know that the decision-making process
is in the moment.
Is going to be in the moment. I can't possibly choose which fork in the road to go.
Right.
Like to go down now.
Right.
I need to know what my destination is, and that'll keep me on track. So I outline, but I do it.
You're not a slave to it.
I do it in a dirty, dirty-handed kind of like bags of topsoil way. So
in an American Midwest way. I love it.
Perfect.
Nate, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
What a joy. The book, the first installment of N.D. Wilson's new fantasy adventure series, Outlaws of Time, The Legend of Sam Miracle, is available at bookstores everywhere. You can find more out on storyented.com. Now, finally, earlier this year, we brought you an exclusive interview with Joseph Fiennes, the star of the film Risen. In it, Joseph plays a Roman centurion who arrives at a crossroads when he's tasked to investigate what's happened to the body of a man following a crucifixion. On May 24th, Risen arrives in stores on DVD. Here's an exclusive peek at what you can expect.
The film is a murder mystery, and then that mystery becomes an even greater theological mystery.
Sort of a new take on the New Testament story of the resurrection for a contemporary audience.
The idea of seeing it through the eyes of a non-believer, of Claudius,
in this sort of genre style. It just worked really well.
And the power of faith, where you really start to see how powerful faith is and how something that you thought is true all your life can just turn on its head and it can change you forever.
Risen, starring Joseph Fiennes, is available at stores everywhere and online on May 24th. That is all the time we have until next week. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. You can also sign up for my free e-blast and get much more there. Next week, it's Memorial Day weekend. We'll bring you a special preview of the National Memorial Day concert here in D.C. Producer Jerry Colbert will be my guest, as well as co-host Joe Mantegna, and much more. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.